Intro. Beyond Two Souls is a game that came out in 2013 that shows off a good way that a game can show the ideas of human mortality and also the military-industrial complex that happens to be in a lot of people's lives. In the game, it's about the life of Jody Holmes, who is played by Elliot Page, but it tells this life out of order in the original playthrough. The way that it shows life between Jody and her spirit Aiden, pronounced differently for some reason, actually works better for the game, but it can also show how the military would be willing to weaponize anything unique like Jody. It's something that has multiple meanings when you look at it, and can actually show all those ideas well. Since not only is life relatable, it's life, but also the military. It's both the things we really notice in our lives, so it doesn't seem like a common combo, which makes it more interesting when a game does something based on that. But first, we should know the story. For this, I'll really go in order of the life sequences, not the playthrough, because it goes in a confusing order when you go in the original order that it's in. So, we play as Jody Holmes, but we had this spirit following us named Aiden. Jody right now is like a young kid and wants to play with other people, so she sneaks out, but Aiden almost kills one of the kids after he chokes her for some reason. This puts her into the care of Nathan and Cole, who are two doctors who know a thing or two about this sort of thing. They raise her and also teach her how to control Aiden so that he won't kill innocent people anymore, don't do that. But also the portal to the infraworld is starting to be built. The infraworld is the world of the dead and all the spirits, basically. But sadly for Nathan, his wife and daughter die in a car crash, but this is how Jody learns she can channel the energy from spirits to have them communicate with people. It would be weird if this happened in real life since her literal voice changes. Jody also tries to do normal people things, but Aiden kinda gets in the way through everything because he doesn't want to separate from her. She goes to a party, but Aiden almost kills the people at the party. Typical stuff, and it's also no good for Jody's reputation. Jody also helps shut down a broken condenser after some spirits are running amok all over the place in the room. So because of this, the CIA recruits her and forces her to do a bunch of missions. One of the missions is to get secret information, and then another is just a step above that and kill a warlord in Somalia. But guess what? The world police accidentally killed the president of Somalia. Then Jody flees and goes on the run from the CIA because she's rightfully mad about the Somalia thing. On her journey, we get to meet a few homeless people who live in the streets, but we also meet a Navajo family in the desert. We help the homeless people by helping the one who's pregnant give birth, but we help the Navajo family ward off an evil spirit. But how dare we try to talk to our biological mother? Because that happens, and that would be bad because they're going to catch us for that. But after getting caught, we return to Nathan, and he's like, I'm building this big condenser, and it's going to help make sure my wife and daughter come back to me. He wants Jody to help him do this, but of course, Jody is like, no, don't do that yourself. And we try to leave, but wait, sedation. Now, Jody is trapped, and Aiden has to save her by getting Cole and Ryan. Then we go into the reactor and shut it down, but not before everyone and their fish's mother around us is attacked. Nathan just unalives himself, not gonna lie. But we also learn that Aiden is Jody's stillborn brother, and we have a decision to choose from. Life or death. Personally, I chose life, but you could choose death and reunite with Aiden. In life, we reunite with the person chosen, which in my case was Zoe, which is the pregnant homeless person's child, but actually in a home now, thank goodness. The future does not look good in this world. That's all I'll say about that. But that's about it for the story. So then you roll the credits when you see the future of the world. The idea of life and death is something that is prevalent in the way this game's story progresses. We see Jodie's life in the non-chronological order that it appears in. It's interesting because you can't really imagine witnessing someone's life like that, where you never know what moment in their life will come next. Though, not all her life is shown, obviously, because life is full of boring moments. If anybody's life was as active as Jodie's, we would have a million movies talking about it and just all the magazines about it. But that's just not how life is. Let me show you the world, the wrongdoings of those in charge, and live to tell the tale, is not really something that's a common thing in life. Which is why it makes sense that Jodie is like this golden star example in terms of like things done in life. One, because it's a video game, but two, because it makes her feel unique. And like she's on this grandiose arc. You are the main character in a sense, but it also is able to show that she's unique, considering she also has Aiden, who really is a representation of the afterlife in a way, since he's a stillborn twin of Jodie. It's safe to say that him being a spirit makes sense, and Aiden is a good way to show that the afterlife in this world is really someone, or whoever died, that looks over the people still alive. Because apparently, that's what happens when you pick death at the end of the game. You just watch over Zoe as she prepares for a fight in the future. But the difference between life and death shows the importance of how life really is. Since the final big choice of the game is choosing between life and death, the way you make that choice really depends on the choices you made through the game, I feel like. If you make bad decisions and kind of ruined up Jodie's life, then you're more likely to choose death. But if you made Jodie's life good, you're probably more likely to choose life, because you've seen the importance in the life she has, or that she's lived. And it's hard to leave everything you still have behind. Because you know that they're still there, but also because you know that life is never finished. There's always more to do in life, and so in the game, you're never really finished, quote. There will always be more to do, especially when you are in this, like, in-between, at, like, a young age, like Jodie is in the story. So, it really shows that life is this thing, and more of anything you could do, of course, within limit. Some people sadly really can't do everything, but also the life Jodie lives is one that nobody lives, so it's like watching this movie of why her life matters, which is why the last big choice feels more impactful, because we've seen everything that Jodie has lived and gone through, so we know that she would leave behind everything that happened if we picked death. But throughout the story, we also get to see the side of death that is also important in the final choice. We see everyone who has died throughout the story, so that at the end, we know that we aren't going into death fully blind without nothing to the name. That's why it's such like a hard choice to make, because we know no matter what side we pick in the end, that we will have people that we've seen and cared for. There's the people who we watched die, but also Aiden as well. It's a mix of characters on both sides that's really good, because it wouldn't be that hard of a choice to make if it was just Aiden on that side, because, you know, why? So, of course, there is everyone we met. It makes sense because it shows that for Jodie at least, no matter which side of the mortality spectrum she's on, there would be people on both sides, because that's how life moves. Life will move on, but not everyone's line runs parallel to each other. Some of them stop when others are still going. That's just how life usually is. People be dying all the time, but that's a conversation for a different day. But this idea is shown with Nathan when he loses his daughter and wife. He tries to manipulate death so that it's not separate from life. When that's not how that works, that's just not. It's not. That's not how it works. Nathan just couldn't get over the fact that he lost the two people who meant basically the world to him in the end. So he decides he'll go meet them himself. But before he does that, fusing life and death is what takes the idea of death away from people and having something to actually fear, because that's one of the things we fear. This is because we all know death is one of the few natural fears built in the people's lives. So that's why we don't want to die for the most part, because we know once we're gone, there is no coming back. And that's why it hurts when we lose somebody we know or like, because of that same reason. There's no coming back. There isn't. There won't be. And that's just death. Death is what separates the dead from the living. So once you breach that barrier and enter this like liminal place where you're in between these two things, you manipulate these feelings you have about death. It's manipulated because if I take a toy away from you and I burn it, bam, it's gone. It's burnt. Bomb, boom, bam. It's gone forever in your mind. But what happens if I give you back the toy after you just saw it get burned? Same identical toy, and it was actually never burned. What happens? You just got manipulated, Buckster. Hate to break it to you, but now your whole perspective is kind of changed on what getting rid of something is. But mortality is just something that is a part of life. Sadly, there isn't any way to avoid it. And sometimes it's kind of better to embrace it because immortality isn't a gift. And in the game, you can see the idea of what death and life is like, mainly during the last chapter of the game, but also when you play as Aiden versus Jody. It's a good way that like mortality is shown throughout the game, really. The military-industrial complex is something that's been around in the United States, at least, for a while. For the people who may want a dictionary definition, it is the relationship between a country's military, the defense industries, and the government of the country itself. It may seem a little off to bring it up in a game about mortality, but it does relate to Jody's life in the game. This is because Jody, as we know, has a special gift in the form of Aiden. Aiden acts as a sort of extra Jody, in a way, as he can go and knock over things and manipulate things that can help Jody do more things in her life than just was like her own body. You know what that sounds like? Free Money Simulator. Because in the story, Jody is taken from Nathan so that she can join the CIA. Well, more like she is forced to be there, but that's whatever. The interesting thing was the story is how realistically it kind of depicts the way projects are done in these departments like the CIA or FBI. Probably, gonna say probably, and I gotta say probably, by the way, just because this is just how they act sometimes. But the way they handled the condenser is pretty similar to how the US kind of intervenes with like other countries in a way. So in the story, Jody is brought into the CIA and kills one of the presidents of Somalia under the propaganda that Jody was kind of forced to believe that the president was a warlord because she didn't know anything. She didn't know better or anything at all about what was happening. That's how the propaganda begins on the inside, and that's by spreading misinformation about an unknown in order to fill that like little gap in the mind. That's the idea of preconceived notions. But it's safe to say that this could have been for something like the War on Terror equivalent in this world. But also, the other thing that is interesting is when another country builds a condenser to the infraworld. This is seen as a threat in the game because the country is painted as the villains. That's out of the blue. Whoa, who would have ever done that? Later, it is also shown that they couldn't handle the condenser, but the idea of this big, huge foreign country building this new technology was seen as a security threat to the US. That's why Jody and the CIA was forced to go and infiltrate the base where it's at. It's basic Cold War stuff where the US has to be on top of everything with everything. That's just how Cold Wars are. And this is also seen as a secret mission, one that the public probably wouldn't know about. That's just what happens in US history because documents are usually released way after stuff is done about those missions. But on these missions, Jody is mainly used because she has Aiden with her. Her gift is the main reason the CIA wants her because they know she would be dangerous if not. She would be this harmful person if she was set free, which is why they were trying to catch her when she was on the run. Aiden's this thing they know nothing about, but also she's a classified person with classified information. I'm surprised your head didn't get blown off in the game. I'm not gonna lie, but that classified information that she has, it just can't get out. That's just how it usually is. Because the infraworld is something that the public just doesn't have to know about, some things are best kept secret if they are maybe, just maybe, a threat to the people. But who needs to know about that? Who does? Those are for scapegoats. And that's the next part about this. The condenser built in the US in the story, both of them are dangerous. Both of the condensers are dangerous. But the Black Sun is more dangerous because you can just kind of tell. I mean, if you're looking at the game, you can just tell. It's much more in your face with the amount of dead people that are coming back to life through it and actually coming back to life. Was the first one, it's dangerous, but it's just entities, not really a bunch of humans coming back to life. And the fact that this was built to get a leg up in other countries, kind of shows where the world's military stands in the game. Being ahead by any means needed. Keeping this giant thing a secret that could hurt people's lives and having this private contractor in the world probably fund it shows how inflated the complex had become. Considering this was also in there was a whole new department made for it clearly in the government. So clearly government intervention was involved with it some way or another. The complex grows because the amount of money spent to develop this type of technology is also growing. Picture this. You need to make a gun that fires a laser, the temperature of the sun. You don't know how to do that, so the government comes in and gives you a bunch of money to develop it with a company who does know how to do it. That company's worth a little bit, so just about 100 billion or more. But you work with them, but then you're I need more money. Of course, any sane person would be what is wrong with you? But they give you the money anyways. That's the sunk cost fallacy. But after more and more and more time and money, you eventually get the thing done and give it to the government. They ask you to do that many more times, and so eventually you form a contract with the government saying you'll be the one of their suppliers for the sun laser. It may be exclusive or not, doesn't matter, but you will constantly be getting a cash flow to develop and sell the sun laser to the government. Your company will grow more and more over time just because of this. This is the complex that is growing more and more in a way that shows that what this condenser is like. One way it grew more and more was the money and the investments, but also instead of multiple guns, it is one condenser, and there's also a new department brought into the mix in the government. This growing complex can also show slowly but surely have a larger impact on the people around them. Since more of the government's money is going there, that means tax dollars, precious tax dollars, and the taxpayers' money is going there. It's a constant way that money can be secured since taxes are permanent, but also it will have a growing base every year. So you were guaranteed your money and you've built the sun laser. Congrats! You've basically won in the complex type of deal. There's no laws saying how much you can pay yourself, only laws saying how little you have to pay others. You've done business with the government now, and you're on top. That's the military-industrial complex ladder you have just climbed. And that's really how the game shows off the real-life version of it inside a world with mortality. It's a real thing that happens with countries and many militaries in the world. Sometimes it goes unchecked, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on where you're talking about and how their government's like. But it's sad to see when it gets like to be so big and so intrusive in people's lives, like in the game. The gameplay is something that is unique because, of course, when you're playing a choice-based game, you have to try to spice it up a little bit. Like how Life is Strange lets you undo choices as a gimmick. In this game, it's the form of Aiden and letting you mess with things and play as basically a second character, since this is how you play the games sometimes. Especially in the last section when you have to rescue Jody. You have to get Ryan and Cole and use Aiden as a way to get them to Jody. It's a really good touch because you were playing as a ghost, which means nobody can see you, and you can go through walls. It adds a new layer to things like stealth and other sections of the game that usually are different from a real person. Like when you kill or take over people, you have to sneak your way close to them, or sometimes you have to knock something over to get their attention and then do it, which is a cool concept. I like it. It's a fun element with fun puzzles, which describes a lot of good games, but also it makes you feel like you did something when you successfully played the game right. But these puzzles usually have to be solved in the right way, as the game still has that cinematic thing going where the game just keeps moving because it is a movie in a game form. It does it well because it uses motion capture. The main actors, Elliot Page and Willem Dafoe, both did a good job with their performances. It was done the same way until Dawn was done with like the motion capturing and stuff like that. And so the game moves slowly and feels like a movie, which would make sense because that's how they handle things in the game. It just makes sense. That's how choice-based games are, but it's also how like the music is in the game as well. For the music, it does feel a lot more cinematic, like if it was made for a Mission Impossible movie or something like that. It might be because it was composed by Lorne Balfe. I probably butchered that. But he does some of the Mission Impossible songs, but it's also because you feel like you're playing a Mission Impossible game sometimes, just with the quick time events and stuff like that. The music kind of gets you more hyped, but don't get distracted, Fletchling. You will have to click those buttons to get those skill checks. Sadly, it's not like Rhythm Heaven where you press a button to the beat, but it is still fun to feel like you're in a movie. That's always cool, but since the music was good and actually elevated the game, we have to see what the other people thought, the iconic critics. Destructoid, apparently, didn't. They gave the game a 5 out of 10, which, should be a crime. Eurogamer gave it a 6 out of 10, and so did IGN. Goes to prove people are wrong, I guess, because GameSpot was able to be right and give it a 9 out of 10. We have someone who's sane around these parts. I don't know what these people were thinking when reviewing this, but at least Polygon gave the game an 8 out of 10. So overall, it was just ideas and thoughts, no clear consensus somehow for the game with reviewers and stuff, which happens sometimes. But, what are you gonna do? It just happens. Overall, Beyond Two Souls is a good game at showing a lot of things relating to mortality in the military industrial complex. It does this in a way that's easy to play if you know what button is on the controller, and is fun to play and unique to experience. I liked it a lot, and personally, I would give it like a 9.3 out of 10, but that's my personal opinion. You may think differently, and if you do, you can comment your thoughts down below. If you want to, it doesn't matter in a way, somewhat. But that's about it. Please like and subscribe, pretty please.